Hi, this is Dr. Mateg. In this video, I'll talk about treating chronic stress with frequency-specific microcurrent, or FSM. First, I'll give you some information about stress physiology, or how our body responds to stress. Then we'll look at what happens in chronic stress, stress that never stops. I'll show you which organs and organ systems are harmed by chronic stress. Then we'll look at which FSM programs you can use to neutralize the effects of chronic stress. First, we'll look at programs that resonate to the brain, central nervous system, and adrenal glands. We use these programs to break the hold of chronic stress on the body. Then we'll look at programs that will help to reverse the negative impact of chronic stress on different organs and organ systems. The totality of our brain and spinal cord is called the central nervous system, or CNS. The CNS includes a conscious or voluntary part and an unconscious or involuntary part. We call the unconscious central nervous system autonomic, meaning automatic, and there are two parts of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. You can see from the diagram that these are two anatomically distinct systems. The sympathetic is shown on the left, the parasympathetic on the right. The parasympathetic nervous system slows things down and is referred to as the rest and digest system. The sympathetic nervous system revs things up and is often referred to as the fight or flight system. Normally, these two systems are supposed to swing back and forth. When we eat, rest, and sleep, the parasympathetic system stimulates digestion and absorption of nutrients and building of cells, tissues, and organs. When we exercise or are physically and mentally active, the sympathetic nervous system mobilizes our energy, increases blood flow, and increases our alertness. The problem starts with chronic stress. With chronic stress, the sympathetic nervous system is on all of the time. We call this sympathetic dominance or overdrive. When we are in a constant state of sympathetic dominance, there is persistent tissue breakdown and inflammation. Sympathetic dominance also suppresses the parasympathetic system, whose job it is to absorb nutrients and rebuild tissues. The image on this slide is from caringmedical.com. Here's a quote that came with the image. Quote, "When there is a greater amount of sympathetic nervous system activity than parasympathetic over a long period of time, systemic inflammation, neuropathic pain, and other long-term health problems occur." We all have a general sense that too much stress isn't healthy. Here's a review article that looked at all of the research available on the impact of chronic stress. They broke the results down into these areas: brain function complications, memory problems, cognition and learning problems, immune system functions, function of the cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal complications, and finally endocrine system complications, and that includes the thyroid. Here's a summary in 3 columns of first, chronic stressors, then what happens in the stress response, and then finally the effects of chronic stress on different organ functions and systems. Some chronic stressors that most of us are facing right now are in our relationships, in the disruption of social norms. This includes political battles, economic uncertainties, and also environmental and climate stressors. With chronic stress, the brain becomes hypervigilant. There is a sympathetic dominance and parasympathetic suppression, and eventually a deterioration of adrenal function. Some of the impacts of chronic stress on our body include chronic inflammation, downregulation and/or disruption of immune function, disruption of the gastrointestinal system, overworking of the cardiovascular system, sleep loss, suppression of the thyroid, and a reduction of the liver's ability to perform its detoxification functions. We have FSM programs in our FSM toolbox to address many of these factors. Obviously, we can't change the outside world, so we begin by working on neutralizing the stress response in the middle column. We want to take our brain and central nervous system out of the alarm response that is generated by our stressors. This means using FSM protocols like those shown in the middle column. These include programs affecting the brain, like the concussion protocol, the limbic system reset, programs that increase dopamine secretion, programs that stimulate vagal tone, balance the anterior pituitary, downregulate the sympathetic nervous system, upregulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and support the adrenals, and also programs for emotional factors and acupuncture meridians. Then we have FSM programs to support the different organs and organ systems that are impacted by chronic stress. So with FSM, we can reduce inflammation, we can support the immune system, support and heal the GI system, heal and support the cardiovascular system, promote sleep, and also support the thyroid gland. Here are specific FSM protocols that address each level of the stress response. For the hyperactive, hypervigilant brain, we have CNS quiet sympathetics, CNS relax and balance, CNS shock after trauma, brain limbic system recover, and finally concussion relieve chronic stress of nervous system. For the anterior pituitary, we have endocrine, anterior pituitary, and for the adrenal glands, we have adrenal support and adrenals quiet and distress. We are also able to stimulate the vagus nerve. Chronic stress suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system. The vagus nerve is how the brain sends parasympathetic messages to the body. In the image on the right, look at all of the organs that are innervated by this one nerve, the vagus nerve. Stimulating this nerve, getting it back online, benefits all of these organs and is a powerful way to reverse the ill effects of chronic stress. Chronic stress is the main cause of insomnia. Let's look at how you would treat insomnia when you take the cause of insomnia, chronic stress, into account. At the top, you have chronic stress. The stress puts the brain in a revved up alarm state. We can counter this brain hyperactivation with the concussion protocol. The hyperaroused brain activates the sympathetic nervous system. We counter this with the CNS quiet sympathetics protocol. During stress, the pituitary releases a hormone which travels through the blood to the adrenal glands, activating the adrenal stress response. We can balance the pituitary gland with the endocrine anterior pituitary protocol. At the level of the adrenals, we can balance and quiet adrenal function with the adrenal support and adrenals quiet and distress protocol. Then finally, we can use the sleep and sleep disturbance protocols before we go to bed to sleep. Hypothyroidism is more complex. Over 90% of hypothyroidism in the United States is due to an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's disease. In Hashimoto's, the immune system goes out of whack and attacks the thyroid. The crippled thyroid is then unable to produce sufficient amounts of thyroid hormone. The root cause of all autoimmune conditions, including Hashimoto's, lies largely in the gut. This is because over 70% of the immune system lives in the lining of the gut. So gut health and immune health are closely intertwined. We've seen that chronic stress causes GI problems and also disrupts the function of the immune system. So in this case, you have two systems that you need to work on to really get to the root cause of hypothyroidism, which again is the autoimmune attack on the thyroid. I'm not going to talk through all of the points here, but this video will be available along with a printable copy of the slides and transcript so you can follow this sequence and see which programs to use for hypothyroidism. The last thing I'd like to mention regarding chronic stress is PTSD. Emotional trauma can create a repeating stress loop in the brain and central nervous system. This loop can reinforce itself and become hardwired. There are many reported cases of FSM significantly helping to break this loop. You see listed here a number of FSM protocols that will be of benefit to PTSD sufferers. You can also find a paper by Dr. Carol McMakin entitled Mental Health, the Brain, and PTSD linked to in the posting of this video. That's it for this brief look at how to use FSM to treat chronic stress. This is Dr. Harlan Mateg. This video is for members of the FSM Healing Group, which is a private group. You can share a link to this video with individuals you think might benefit from the information at your discretion, but you may not publish this video elsewhere.